All right, so hello, this is Steve Nava, sociology instructor, and I'm working on a project called The Spaces of Belonging for the California History Center. Today it's February 26, 2025, and we will be interviewing Brendan Boon, who operates the Minasan shop, and we'll learn more about the details. And this is in San Jose, Japantown. The Spaces of Belonging project is an oral history project bridging generations through dialogue about the deeper meaning of community and social and cultural change. And again, we thank you, Brendan, for being able to be part of this recorded interview. And in general, we're trying to learn a little bit more about community, the idea of community during changing times. And we're centering mostly on Santa Clara Valley, mostly San Jose. And so to start, if you could just please share your age, occupation, and other ways you might identify yourself. And then Eric will take the first question.
Yep.
Sure. My name is Brendan Boon. I am 30 years old today, and I've been I guess, tech recruiter now for about 7 years. I got the opportunity to open a little store called Minasan. So right now I'm both working my full-time job, and then I have the shop on most nights as well as weekends.
All right. So the first question's pretty easy. Just if you don't mind, just tell us about yourself. Just who are you? What involvement do you have with your community? What kind of work do you do?
Yeah. So again, my name is Brendan. I've been, I guess, within the confines of Japantown, I've always sort of had this connection to this community. My mother is Japanese American. So she's third generation. I'm fourth generation. We call it Yonsei. And then my dad is Chinese from Singapore. They met in Hawaii. So I think this connection to Hawaii and California and Asia has always been something that is very much so a part of me. Um, I mentioned that I've been working as a recruiter for the past 6 or 7 years, but I think retail has been something that I've always been interested in since maybe like middle school. I've always wanted to have my own cafe or have my own clothing shop. So when the opportunity popped up for us to open up the shop, I think it was sort of like this crazy moment where I was able to sort of bring together a lot of ideas that I've had for a very, very long time and just throw them into one space. Yeah, my life has never been so full and hectic, working both 9 to 5 and having the shop, but we're still having a ton of fun, and I feel like I think the deeper connection that we have to the neighborhood is something that feels fresh for a lot of folks, but also I think we're able to bring a lot of new perspective in and just talk story with a lot of people. So it's been an amazing experience.
All right, cool.
And
I should mention. Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I grew up in Cupertino, so not too far from here, 15 minutes away. But Japantown as a community, I've always been a part of things like the Japanese American Citizens League. I went to Japanese American summer school at Mountain View Buddhist Temple called Nakayoshi Gakko, and I think like it took me a long time to realize how deeply embedded I was into this community or how much I cared about it. But I think the older that I get, the more that I find myself gravitating towards these topics and trying to be a preservationist, especially for this very, very nuanced Japanese American culture. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you shared that part too. And another question we have is, can you talk a little bit about the timeline of opening the shop? What was the inspiration? You mentioned it, but if you can go a little more detail about what inspired it in terms of the particulars that you're selling and promoting, and yeah, if you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think so. I guess the timeline with the shop is there's the shop that was in this space before was called Headliners, and it was by our good friend. His name is Mai Nguyen, and he had this shop for 7 or 8 years, but his business had been around for probably closer to 12 to 15 years. I've known him since I was probably 15 years old. I would take the bus down here from Cupertino, force my now wife to get on the BTA with me. We would walk to Japantown and we would go get banana crepe and then stop in at Headliners and talk to the owner just about. He was like my first friend within this sort of creative community. So we've been now living in this community for 4 to 5 years, and I think we've become closer and closer friends with these folks. I reached out to Mai the moment that I found out that Headliners was going to be closing down, and I just asked him, hey dude, what is the plan the space. What do you have planned, and what's going to come next? And I think there was a few potential folks that were interested in moving forward, but I think we had a lot of support from different folks in the neighborhood to just that sort of like understood my involvement with the community and sort of what I look for. And I guess people kind of just trusted me to have this opportunity. So we opened up, I reached out to him mid-December, maybe like December 16th or so. And then we opened up the shop early January, January 11th. The concept behind the shop is sort of twofold. On one end, we get to be this sort of, in a way, sort of community center for the Japantown community. I think one thing that I have noticed in the community over the past 15 years is when I was a kid, you used to be able to, we'd be waiting for Sushi Maru or Minato, and they had like an hour-long wait. So we're walking around looking for something to do. As a kid, there was like all these toy stores or the anime store you could walk into. I noticed for me now, when I'm walking around the neighborhood at 7 or 8 p.m., almost all the retail shops are closed. So a big part of what I wanted to do was just create community space. I think a big part of what we try to do is make sure people don't really feel pressured to make a sale, and we want people to just come in and to be able to look around and hang out. So we offer complimentary tea. We have senbei that we can give folks. We have movies playing on the wall constantly. We have a big hangout area where we have a couch and a coffee table and a couple of chairs around it. Sometimes we have a puzzle that people can just walk in and do. I think like it's 50% sort of community center and gathering space, and then the other, I guess, 50% would be focused on just things that have inspired us over the years. We've been in a lot of different Asian American spaces over the past 10 years. We see what's happening in cities like San Francisco, and in LA has been a big one, especially Orange County and the San Gabriel Valley. We see what's happening in places like Honolulu. And I think the three of us collectively, me, one of our best friends, Michael, and my wife, Michelle, have done a lot of this like exploring of this space for the past couple of years. And I guess it's almost like a duty of us to bring some of that flavor and sort of like a unique retail experience to San Jose.
So in terms of popular culture, could you talk a little bit about what makes you excited in terms of including pop culture in your space?
Yeah, I think like when I think about pop culture, especially within the context of Japantown, and there are so many things that we, as I think Asian Americans growing up in this area, grew up with, especially being Japanese American and coming to Japantown. We have all these. There's a lot of nuance in this community, and there's a lot of things that I guess like a big part of what we want is to take this, what I would say is like this more like soft culture of Japanese American as a community, and sort of like have like a place where it's celebrated, right? Like a big part of what we sell is like the old references to old Japantown businesses or old T-shirts that have come from this community or from other Japanese American communities. Like we have a lot of things on display even that I would say make us akin to like a museum at times. So we have like a lot of old bowling shirts. Some of them come from South Central Los Angeles, and we had a couple that came in the other day and said, hey, I used to bowl at Holiday Bowl until the mid 70s, and we used to eat at this coffee shop and get saimin all the time. I guess as opposed to like pop culture, a lot of it is like this relationship between things that we find nostalgic just growing up in these communities. And that's sort of like the thing that we're like outwardly, almost like aggressively trying to highlight is I guess, Asian American youth and growing up in this thing, but also I think having that connection to Asia has been a big one for us as well. So we constantly have folks bringing in things from Japan, or we have friends who have family in Taiwan, and we want to make sure that the youth can feel like they have that connection to Asia, and it's okay to be Asian American and also like have this strong connection with the Pacific.
Yeah, and in terms of your perception of how folks, what different age groups connect to different kinds of pop culture, how would you describe that?
Yeah, I think one of the blessings of being in Japantown in general is this, it's very, very multi-generational. Like if you go to Roy's on a random weekday, you will see folks that are college students that are doing their homework. You will see senior citizens who live in or just picked up their lunch from like Uikai Senior Center, and they're just walking over and catching Roy's on the way in. You'll see folks in my parents' generation, like the Sansei folks, grabbing lunch. I think that a big part of what we try to do is, I guess, curate space where people can come in at any age and any sort of background, and we'll have something they will feel some sort of connection to, or will be friendly enough that they'll be open to having a conversation and interested in hearing about these stories.
You know, what's interesting, Brendan, is when I first got interested in this project, I was kind of nudged into the Japantown as a space because of I'm working with Tom Mizu, who's active in the community for many years, and I happen to have just moved into the neighborhood not that long before, in fact. And one thing that I immediately started to think about was the role of nostalgia and a kind of affection for a place, I guess a community or a neighborhood like Japantown. And so, you know, I started wondering, you know, what is it that draws people to a space? And I thought, well, it has something to do with the old and the new, right? There's something about multi-generationality that is refreshing, I guess you would say, or yeah, I wasn't sure if it was a nostalgia thing, but what do you think about the idea of nostalgia and like what do you think really, if that plays a role at all in the love for Japantown that people tend to have?
I think it's undeniably a big part of why a lot of people, especially for people from my generation, I've noticed this trend of like younger Asian Americans wanting to get involved in the neighborhood, and people who were maybe involved as a kid and didn't really see the value in it or didn't really understand it now wanting to come back to it. And I think on top of that, I think that Japantown has this interesting way of retaining community members of all different age groups, right? We have multiple senior centers in the neighborhood. We have like we have housing for older folks. We have multiple community centers that are senior leaning. I think that it's somehow happened that people that tend to be interested in Japantown as a whole are folks that have some sort of appreciation for nostalgia, right? And I don't know exactly how or why it happened that way, but if you watch, it's not an uncommon place to see classic cars, right? It's not an uncommon place to see photos of a family in a restaurant that has been running it for like 50 years. It's one of those places that I think somebody once or recently told me that San Jose feels like a last bastion for these sort of things, and when we compare it to even other metros, and I think that there's some truth in that statement, in that Japantown is like aggressively one of those places that keeps the historic facades of all the buildings. Everybody who is in this community is somebody who has sort of been a part of this community, and the people, it's like almost like a village within a city, in that the community specifically like almost seems to like filter in and out of different cultures, and people who like don't really resonate with the Japantown culture don't end up staying, and people who like are really really with it sort of like are given opportunities. I think Japantown is like an inherently nostalgic place, but I do think that is changing over time. I think that we are starting to see a lot less of the things that I would consider nostalgic Japantown, and yeah, I think that's a big part of what I want to do, even with this space, is to make sure that these things are celebrated and there's a place where people are still dressing like my grandpa did, or finding clothes like my grandpa wore. You know what I mean? And at least having conversations about old bowling alley talk.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Well, we have Kenneth as well. I'm not sure, Kenneth, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Kenneth Lee.
Hey, Kenneth. Nice to meet
Sorry
you.
for coming in a little late. I got stuck in downtown actually.
All good, dude. Not too far.
Yeah. All right. So are we on the next question? I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, number 2.
Okay. I'm actually really interested in your family background. I also have along that question. Did you also primarily grow up in the area you're currently working in? If not, can you explain how it was like growing up in that different time and place of your childhood?
Yeah. So answer the first part of the question. My mom is Japanese American, born and raised in San Jose. She was born and raised in South San Jose. My dad was born and raised in Singapore. He was in Hawaii, met my mom when she was on like her last semester at San Jose State, she got to do some sort of study abroad thing, and she was able to go to Hawaii. Her parents, my grandpa was born in Gilroy, agricultural family, and they had always been in Gilroy. They worked on farms. The whole family is in Salinas or in Monterey still today, or we still have a little house in downtown Gilroy as well. And then my grandma was in Alameda. After the war happened, she ended up living in East Oakland, right around the corner from the Black Panthers sort of primary headquarters. And I think like we've always had that affinity towards both the East Bay and like I guess Gilroy Valley. And the second part of the question was about where I grew up and sort of my upbringing. Is that correct?
Yeah, like your upbringing, your childhood, like how was it like during that time? Yep.
Yeah. I grew up in Cupertino, California, which at the time was Cupertino is like an interesting town in that I think it used to be like a very classic sort of like Santa Clara Valley orchard sort of town, and over time shifted towards being, I think at one point it was very Japanese American. So you can still see the bones of it today. There's a lot of these old Japanese American restaurants, like Azuma has been there, and that place has like deep roots even in Japantown's neighborhood sort of businesses. Like a lot of them have relationships. I think growing up it was very safe. At that time it felt slow and agricultural, but then it was slowly starting to shift to I guess like the sort of guard between the old Asian American community and the newer Asian American community was something that was happening pretty aggressively. So I guess I grew up in Cupertino as one of the only like third or fourth generation folks. So I definitely did have this feeling of othering where folks would talk to me about their upbringings and the sort of trials and tribulations that they're going through with their parents and dealing with being a first or second generation immigrant. And these are things that, as also an Asian American, I didn't fully understand because I was fourth generation, right? And it's hard to explain. My parents we're Asian, obviously, but what we eat at home is like more akin to like Midwestern food, plus with like a Japanese American twist, right? So yeah, I guess we always had both Cupertino feeling like a very, very Asian American place. And then down the road, we have Japantown, which is Asian American, but in a obviously very different way. And I think over time, I started to realize that Japantown was a place that I had a very, very personal connection to. My grandparents got married here at the temple. My parents got married here at the Christian church. We came here at least once a week to get dinner and to pick up mochi for my grandma. Like whenever we would go to my grandma's house, which is in South San Jose, literally every single time, which is at least once a week, we would come here, go to Shuedo, and bring them some mochi, right? So I think very, very Asian American sort of upbringing overall, but uniquely, I think we had this relationship with the JA community and with Japantown.
And the next question is, during your childhood, did you remember any special or significant places that gave you a sense of belonging, places that made you feel connected to something special that you could identify with and felt like you really fit in?
Yeah, I think the first place that comes to mind for me, weirdly enough, is there was this little Japanese American grocery store in Cupertino. So it's right across the street from where like Marukai or Tokyo Central is now. It used to be this little store called Imahara, and it had this connections to South Bay Japanese American agricultural stuff. So I think the owners also owned a farm somewhere in the South Bay originally. And then they opened up this little produce shop, which was very, very popular locally for having really good produce. But for me, it was this place that felt like almost like Japantown outpost in Cupertino. So like you would go there in the morning and they would have fresh tofu delivered from San Jose Tofu almost every single day. They would have like multiple sets of mochi from Shuedo. They sold stuff imported from Hawaii, like a lot of stuff that was hard to find at that time that was imported from Hawaii, like saimin and this is all stuff and like spam and all these Asian snacks before I think Japanese grocery stores were as normal as they are now. That was like the place to go. But I think it was clear to me, even when I was like from the age of 5, that was a space that felt uniquely, I guess I felt a unique affinity to. And can you guys still hear me okay? I think one of my headphones dead. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like Andy has the next question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So I do. I know you talked about your childhood and gave us information on that, but I was wondering about your teenage years and what was like for you to like navigate during that period. Were there any like particular groups or organizations that you could identify with or maybe connect that you connected to in like your personal development of your identity?
For sure. I actually think that a huge part of my, I guess, teenage experience was like heavily shaped by dance. So my brother got into popping and breaking when he was in like middle school. And I remember like that was like my window into like this entire other community. And interestingly enough, at that time, like that was during a time period where I think San Jose and specifically Japantown was kind of going through a creative renaissance, especially related, or at least like there was an overlap with what was happening in the street dance culture. So like at that time, I think I fell in love with hip hop as like an entire thing. I fell in love with the clothes. I started getting interest in art. I never did graffiti, but I started to fall in love with murals and just the idea of doing something creative that felt like it was going against the grain. Right. Even like dance politics, all of it was like really fascinating to me. You would go to dance events and some of them were in Japantown, right? And you would like see all these little clothing brands, people just doing their thing and making clothes and just like contributing to this culture that seemed to be like everywhere in San Jose at that time. So that was like a huge identity thing for me, was being like the guy that was tapped into this San Jose street culture that kids in Cupertino didn't really fully understand. So again, it was like me forcing all my friends to come down here and just like check out all the stores and just scope out all the spots and say hi to folks and just be a part of. I fell in love with small business at the same time too, and like at that time in Cupertino, there weren't that many small businesses where you like really know the owner of a place. Where in Japantown, everybody knows every single shop owner. It's always been that way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Look, the whole dance culture and street culture thing. Would you say, looking back, do you think your teenage self would kind of like be surprised at who you are now?
Whew, I think so. I think overall, there's two routes that I could have taken that I saw myself taking, and one that I'm terrified sometimes of taking is being the guy who I don't know if there's a better way to say this, but I didn't want to be like another guy who found like a comfortable tech 9 to 5 and ended up working in it for the rest of his life. I knew at some point that I was always going to have extracurriculars. I just I never expected to manifest in the way that it did, and I think what I've learned is that progress is in no way linear, right? I ended up at the place that I'm at not because I wanted to, but it sort of just happened. And I've talked to multiple people who have said to me like the reason that you're in this space and why it makes sense is because like you've been like secretly building towards these things for years, and I guess I never realized that I was.
Yeah, secretly like going on like this path or this route that you said. I just want to ask like if was any like major turning point or like decisions that kind of are during at least your teenage period that kind of set you on your current path right now, because it sounds like you wanted to go down a certain path and then completely chose this route.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my mom, she was a guidance counselor at a high school, Homestead High School in Cupertino, actually, for like a super long time. Yeah. So for me, it was like always very much so ingrained in her head, like you have to graduate college, you have to get a 9 to 5, and I think that was just the pathway that was always defined by her generation and the generation before. So I always understood it, but I think that even when we first opened the shop, I had this like really big internal fear of telling my dad. I didn't even tell my dad that we had the shop until literally the day it was happening. And I was like, hey, we're having grand opening for this thing today. If you want to drop by. I think like there's that pressure between wanting to be, I guess, the model minority character and follow like the classic route, as opposed to like, hey, we have a very unique culture that I think should be highlighted. And I think need somebody to devote that time was something that I knew was always going to be a personal like crossroads for me. So no one big moment. I think just pandemic was an interesting one. I think being cooped up for like a full year, and I was living with my wife's family at the time in Oakley and Brentwood, which is like a full hour and a half maybe away, deep in the East Bay next to the Delta. And I think one thing that I super craved at that time was community. the ability to just walk around and say hi to people. So we would come back down to San Jose like once a week and just go to coffee shops and say hi to our friends. And we would always drive through Japantown and pick up mochi too.
Awesome. That's pretty cool.
Thanks, man.
Now, did you see any shops close down during COVID that you were maybe disappointed about, or like mom and pop shops?
In a lot in general.
Mhm.
Yeah, in Japantown, I think one of the biggest hits for us was Banana Crepe. And Banana Crepe was this old shop that used to sell it's where Pauhana, the shave ice place, is now. Before, it was this old like Hawaiian style, very funky place that was run by this guy who was an engineer for many, many, many years, and in his second career opened up Banana Crepe. And he was selling things like, he was selling crepes. You could do savory, you could do sweet. He had an espresso bar, so you could do coffee, but they were also kind of well known for doing shave ice as well. So it kind of made sense that the new shave ice place went into their space. I think that was a big loss for the community, because it was one of the only places where, first of all, it was like a casual cafe, so anybody could walk in, and they had like a really, really big variety of things. Like if you don't want to buy like a whole dessert crepe, you could literally buy like an espresso for $2 or $3 and be able to hang out. It's a term that I've heard a lot recently. Is just, it was like a very good third space for the community. And I think that losing Banana Crepe, post-pandemic Japantown, I think, has like been very, very careful about what comes next for the community. And I think that the loss of Banana Crepe was like a really big loss for our culture.
I'm going to talk a little bit back. I'm going to go back a little bit to growing up. So, you talked a little bit about teenage years and the dance and the graffiti and different things that you were involved with, and your brother. What was it like transitioning to early adulthood from teenage years? What changed and what stayed the same for you?
To early adulthood from being a teenager, yeah.
Yeah, like growing up into being a young adult, having had this teenage experience, like what changed for you in life?
Yeah,
in terms of like participating in communities that mattered to you.
Yeah. I think that there's always been like, me and my wife we're sort of aligned in that we are constantly seeking these things out. I don't think there was ever like I think in high school for sure, I felt like I had infinite access, and I really, really felt like that kid that was into those things. I think like growing up into an adult and having to pay bills and being able to choose where you live and not having the free time to pursue everything that you want to pursue was definitely one of those things where I had to start choosing my battles. And I think as you get older and enter like the workforce, and your friends start to have less time to do those sort of things all the time, I think a big part of what kept me going and interested in these things was I view all of this stuff very much so as like almost like a byproduct of the culture, right? Whereas like these, even like the clothes that I was buying when I was in 7th or 8th grade, those things were happening because the Bay Area was like a place that was conducive to culture at that time, right? And I think that is something that has changed. The face of it has changed, but the Bay Area has still very much so remained a place where people are looking to do cool things. There's like the dichotomy of people that I guess aren't from here or come here and they want the Bay Area to be something else than it is. And then you have the people that are staying here and super aggressively, I'm going to be here, I'm going to put my foot down, and I'm going to make something unique. I think that the alignment, I don't know exactly how it happened, but somehow I got aligned to the latter. And the longer that I stay here, the more that I'm aggressively like, I want to be here, and I want to make sure that we have somebody representing what I think the Bay is, I guess, worth in a way beyond tech culture. So, yeah, I think as I've gotten older, that mantra has led me to be really deeply embedded in specific communities. I still dance once a week with my friends in a garage somewhere. We go to dance battles like at least once a month. I'm still very involved in clothing and the creation of clothing, and we have a lot of friends who run shops and things like that. And we're really, really tapped in, I think, to like both the Bay Area and SoCal and Honolulu's sort of like small business communities.
All right, thank you for sharing that part. And who encouraged you when you were opening the shop? I know you were a little nervous about telling, people that may have had doubts, but who were your main team or supporters, you think?
Yes, I think that my wife and my friends were really, really big ones. I feel super lucky to just have like these people in my life that have known me for so long, and I had so many friends that were like, "Dude, you finally did it." It's been like a common sentiment of like, "Dude, you've been thinking about this for as long as
Mm.
I've known you." Like friends from high school have said that, right? So I think like my community of friends has been a really, really big one. And then beyond that, I think the Japantown community as a whole has been really, really supportive of us. Um, we feel super, super lucky to just have uh, friends who have a lot of businesses in the area, people who are deeply associated with this community, whether it be from the religious side or from cafes, or we have a lot of friends who are here, and all of them basically were like, it seems like the right fit, and gave us endorsements left and right. So that's been a big one for us. Is I just super lucky to have made friends that understand us and support us.
Great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Eric has the next question.
Yeah, I know you mentioned earlier that the building you're in used to belong to another business.
Yeah.
Could you just talk more about that, and what do you know about like the history of the building in general, and just more details about that?
Yeah. So I guess as far back as I know, I used to read through these. There's a Japanese American newspaper that is distributed to the members of the Japanese American Citizens League called the Pacific Citizen, and I used to look through their old ads and through their old like holiday issues, and they have these. You can still find them online through one of the projects through their website, but it's all these ads from businesses from Japantown or from San Jose, and it dates back. They have them from the '60s. They have all the way up until like the mid '90s. They have all these old issues, right? So I was looking into the history, and it turns out that this used to be Jackson Jewelry, which was just a jewelry shop for a very, very long time. And right next door was Aki's Bakery, which is anybody who grew up in this Japantown community or within the JA community is like deeply familiar with Aki's, specifically for their guava cake. So this space used to be a jewelry shop for a very long time. When I started coming here to Japantown as like a teenager, it was a resale shoe store called Soul on Ice, and that was like the only, I think, place in San Jose that you could buy like dead stock Jordans and SBs and things like that. And then after that, it became a store called Headliners, which was specialized in hats. And at that time, this is, I guess, I don't know how familiar you guys are with like things like plunder and like the I guess streetwear as a whole. Like this is directly before that entire community was sort of how do I say this? I don't want to say gentrified, but like there was a time where you have to specifically seek out specific types of clothes, and if it was like a hyper exclusive thing to be aware of these things, right? And that was the time when I would come down here and come to this space, is because it was the only place that would sell specific brands that I really liked, where I had only seen it in San Francisco or in Honolulu. That was like Headliner is like the place to buy that sort of clothes. Um, so yeah, it was the jewelry shop, and then it became Soul on Ice, and then it became the Headliners, and then now it's Minasan.
Oh, can I also just ask where, like, what streets are you located at? Like, what transit lines go through there? I'm curious about that too.
Yeah. So we are on the corner of Fifth Street and Jackson. So basically, like directly in the heart of San Jose's Japantown. Japantown is kind of like an interestingly. I'm sure you guys have spoke about this at length, but Japantown is an interesting community because it isn't really. It's almost like a downtown area that's not really supposed to exist, right? It sort of came up out of necessity, and like it in nature maybe doesn't feel like a downtown area, and it's not really like hyper centrally located. In terms of transit lines, I think the closest thing to us that I can think of would be we have a bus line that runs along Taylor that I think runs through the Rose Garden. It might be the 66, but I don't want to promise. And then we're relatively close to the light rail, specifically the Japantown Air Station. So it's about like a 7-minute walk to get from that station to Japantown proper, and then that one can lead you directly into downtown and to North San Jose. So I know a lot of people who have worked in North San Jose that chose Japantown because it was close, and I know a lot of people who take the light rail to go downtown regularly.
Okay. Uh, I'm really curious about that now because you say it's not like it's centrally located, I guess, but it doesn't look like downtown, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, and like with regards to like the history of Japantown, as far as I'm aware, actually, Steve, is this a good time to talk about these sort of things?
Yeah.
Okay, like Japantown, sort of like in the mid to late 1800s was Chinatown, right? So there was Chinatown, which existed on the corner of what, 6th Street and Jackson, and it was like this area that was bought by this immigrant named John Heinlein. I think he was German, and he created this space where he just wanted Chinese people to be able to thrive and to have community and not be able, like, at this point, I think 4 or 5 Chinatowns had been arsoned in San Jose at that time. So he specifically buys this huge amount of land and he says, I want Chinese people to be able to thrive here, right? So he creates this Chinatown across the street from what is now Minato, and it ran for probably 40-ish years. At the same time, I think late 1800s, like 1890s, Japanese south of Japan is getting hit super hard by some sort of economic hardship. It might be a drought, or it might be just like crops weren't doing well or something like that. So at that time, I know a lot of people, especially from agriculture, from the south of Japan, were moving to the U.S. to work in agriculture. So that's how my great grandparents ended up here. Is both late 1800s, they got on a boat and came over for the promise to work in agriculture, right? And then also at the same time, folks from the Philippines are also coming to the U.S. at that time, and none of them, they're all here sort of like because of the gold rush, right? But then they also all landed in the South Bay working in the orchards or in the fields nearby. So at that time, Japantown became this place that was the gathering place for the Filipino community, for the Japanese community, and for the Chinese community, all sort of within the same 3-block radius. And then when Chinatown, the dude John Heinlein eventually passed away, his kids took over the property, and then when they went bankrupt and couldn't keep it going, the city of San Jose came in and tore down San Jose's Chinatown pretty much immediately. So what was left was Japantown, which had sort of like been created directly next to this area. So that's kind of what I mean by it's not like, if you think about when I think about the grid lines of San Jose and I think about the way that downtown was built, it's like this was probably a residential area at some point. I don't think it was ever really meant to be a hyper commercial. Like being on the corners of 5th and Jackson is kind of like a random one when you think about most of downtown is either along 4th or along 1st.
All right. And would you say that that sort of history of sort of, well, with what was his name? John I didn't catch his last name.
Heinlein. Yeah.
So with him owning it for so long and allowing people to congregate and do what they need to do to have their own community, because they couldn't, because their stuff would get torn down. Do you think that history contributes to how tight knit the community is now?
I think, yeah, definitely so. I think so. I think that a lot of the people who live in Japantown today, or a lot of people who have connections to Japantown today, especially the old Japanese American community, all came from, or I guess like a good chunk of them are 4th or 5th generation Japanese American folks who likely had some sort of connection to Japantown. And not all of them have lived here, but a lot of them have used this place as a community center, right? So I think you can kind of feel it in the air to some degree that this place has always been accepting. And that might be just my own personal bias, but I feel like this used to be at the same time post World War II, right? There was Italian Americans, and they were also, there used to be a Little Italy directly north of Japantown too. A lot of the relocation of Japanese people back into the valley, especially in and around downtown San Jose, the Italian community played a really big part in finding spaces for Japanese people. So when my grandparents came back from camp and they were looking for a place to live, they were getting turned down left and right when they were trying to rent apartments post World War II. And then an Italian couple ended up renting to them directly north of Japantown, right off 4th and Younger. So yeah, something about this place, I think it's just like it has always felt like a protected sort of forward thinking immigrant space since like the mid 1800s probably.
Wow, that's so cool.
It's trippy.
Yeah.
Looks like Kenneth has the next one, which is number 8.
All right. So, well, since opening Minasan, right? Has your sense of community changed much in your opinion? And if it has, how have these changes like that you've witnessed impacted your like connection to it?
It's okay. So I don't know if there's a better way to say this. I think there was a fear in my mind over time that the Japanese American community that I had grown up with was like maybe slowly dwindling away. And it's like it's one of those things where it's like I don't know if you look at Japantown 30 years from now if it'll still feel like Japantown, right? And that was like a really, really big fear of mine. I think now having the shop, even in the 1 month, a little bit more than 1 month that we've been here, I think that that sort of fear has subsided in me because the amount of I think the community support has been really big. We've met folks from pretty much all over the U.S. You know, all different kinds of people. But I think the thing that inspires me the most, or the one that I feel the most deeply in that way, has been we've met a lot of folks in the Japanese American community that have visited from places like L.A. or from Seattle or from the Midwest, or you know, there's a pretty big Japanese American community in like the mountains of like Montana and things like that, and Snake River and things like that. And a lot of them come through Japantown. And I think one thing that there's this message that has been people have been telling me that Japantown feels like one of those places that still feels very like Japanese American at its core, or like very like it still feels like a Japantown where a lot of other Japantowns feel like they've been commercialized. So I guess the longer that I'm here, the more prideful I am of this community that's been built. And it doesn't I think like the overall mantra of Japantown is it doesn't have to always be pure-blooded Japanese people. And I think like we're open to as a community, that's just not the way that it's always going to be. But I think that this entire community has this affinity for history and understands and wants to preserve what makes this place special.
Got it. So yeah, I can understand like where you're coming from too, because my family, they live in Little Saigon, which is like on Story Road, you know, like it's like a main road that a lot of people kind of go through. And so like that area has also kind of been protected similar to Japantown. It may
Yep.
not have as deep of a history, but it was very much purely like Vietnamese American. But obviously, like, of course, over time, it started accepting more pop-ups from both like Mexican descent as well as like maybe even like a little bit of like African American Black like culture as well. It was
Yep.
something that I found also very interesting about that. It also kind of reminds me of the area up upwards of Story Road, right past Little Saigon towards like Amherst Park. There's a lot more Mexican influence up there as well, and I find like all these areas being relatively close to one another is very interesting to me.
For sure. I think that San Jose in general is one of those places where there's these worlds that you wouldn't really know about unless you were a part of that community or unless somebody told you about them, right? I didn't go to Little Saigon until I was in my early 20s probably, right? And then now it's a place that I will bring anybody who comes through town. It's to be aware that we have this community of folks and even like a deep history with Vietnamese American folks moving to the Bay, specifically to San Jose, is something that like should be highlighted. It's what makes San Jose special to me.
I'm gonna jump into number 12, and then we can go back to number 10 with Eric. But it kind of piggybacks, and that's why I'm adding this question: is in terms of ethnicity and race, have you seen changes in the culture of the Japantown community? And can you share a little bit about how you perceive that change happening? You kind of started talking about that already.
Yeah, it's something that even I have to accept as I'm half Japanese American, right? So it's not like I'm this person who is like hyper preserving this bloodline, and there's no way that I can be, right? I think it's like the overall mantra of Japantown is awareness of the state of the Nikkei community. If you talk to folks from the San Francisco Japantown, I think like less than 1% of the Japanese Americans who live in the greater area live in Japantown today, right? And it's like when you hear those things, I think it's you have to realize it's impossible for a community to stay the exact same way over the next 50 to 100 years if like it's where we can't be so deeply rooted in. Sorry, let me rephrase this. I guess like when I think about the immigration of Japanese Americans or Japanese people to the US in like the 1800s, that's like it's a pretty specific community. And a lot of times we have affinity to folks from Hawaii more so than we do people immigrants from Japan, right? And it's both ways where people who are Japanese don't grow up coming to Japantown. They don't really know about Shuedo. They never went to Sando Market, right? It's one of those things where like it's almost two entirely different communities. I think we have to be realistic in expecting that Japantown will change over time. And I think if you look at my generation, a lot of almost our entire community, it's a question that comes up all the time, which is like, we talk to the folks from a lot of the local businesses and you ask like, do you think the kids are going to take over? And a lot of them are working 9 to 5s or they're working in the medical field and they don't have a specific interest in taking on their family's restaurant, right? And even then, we don't have that many young Japanese American chefs that want to open up a restaurant anytime soon, right? In fact, there's probably, you could probably list them on your hand, right? And if you were going to choose a place, would it be San Jose, right? It's like not the hottest market. So I think we have this acceptance that Japantown will change over time. And I feel like I can see it day to day, but I think you have to just be okay with the flow. It's like things are going to change over time and Japantown will still be a historic place with this history, but I hopefully that the next generation of folks will at least celebrate it.
Yeah, that really helps clarify that. And I think we're going to have to skip to number 13, where Andy's question, because we already covered 10, 11, and 12. So Andy, would you?
Yeah. I'd like to ask about your experience and how's like your experience changed and how you kind of like understand what belonging to a community like means to you. Or yeah, and I guess like what role or what do you think or what role do you think like inclusivity and acceptance play in like a strong community?
I think it's huge. I think specifically inclusivity is one of those things that I think Japantown is a community that feels very open arms. And like I would talk about, even before living here, I would always talk about how Japantown seems like the type of place that has a really tight knit community. But it wasn't until I think really living here and doing this day in, day out, I reached a point where I can go to Roy's and sit down with somebody that's 50 years older than me and just talk for like 30 minutes. And this is just neighborhood folks, right? And that's something that I don't think you can really find anywhere in San Jose. So I think my sense of community has shifted quite a bit, where I thought that I was just going to be surrounded by young creatives and folks that were doing from my perspective interesting things. But I think that the thing that makes this community special is the fact that it's so inclusive. If it was, and to be clear, Japantown has changed a lot over time. I think if you look at Japantown even 20 years ago, the community was very heavily shaped by old religious institutions. And that's not to knock on old religious institutions at all, right? The temple has always been a really, really big part of Japantown politics. And same with Wesley, which is our Christian church, right? These folks have always like been very heavily embedded in the way that Japantown moves and the way that Japantown had developed for a very long time. But I think generational shifts have kind of like new folks in the community are much more open to thinking about Japantown from a sustainability perspective, and inclusivity like has to be a part of that. Like as I mentioned, if we only wanted these businesses to be run by the community or specifically from Japanese American communities, this thing would be gone in the next 20 years, right?
I like that answer. Just one more thing, if I can ask, like, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's like kind of struggling to find a sense of belonging?
I think finding a sense of belonging. I think like I'm always like an interest first person. I think like you have the thing that you find yourself personally attracted to, and over time you will find it. Just definitely get yourself out into those sort of spaces, right? Like I think the longer that it's like my attraction, my affinity towards Japantown has led me towards this community. And it's not like I'm doing this active push and trying to get in everybody's faces and trying to make myself known. It's just like my personal interest in this community has led me to be deeply embedded here. And I think it's the same with any interest. The moment that you have an angle on something, you will find the people that will be similar minded, right? And I think that's true of most things, but I think it's especially true in a city like San Jose, where I think it's otherwise sometimes difficult for folks to find belonging. I think that the moment that you find people that are interested in the same thing as you, it's likely that they're going to also be similar people to you in some degree. Like there's obviously a pruning process, but I think that finding the thing that you love and that you can talk deeply about at length will eventually bring you the people.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
You talked a little bit about some of the history, but in general, what do you think are the biggest historical things that have happened in your memory, your lifetime? Biggest historical things that have happened that affect, in general, even beyond Japantown, just more like impacted your life or.
I know I mentioned the pandemic. I really stand by that. I think that was something that really, it was like a cultural reset in a lot of ways, right? And that, like, I think I was forced to think very deeply about what I wanted out of life. I think working from home was a dream for me for a very long time, and all of a sudden it became like torturous, right? Right. And then like a lot of things, like I guess when I think about shifts in culture, again, I'm gonna circle back to like the flourishing of San Jose's creative community just being honestly probably a result of the 2008 crash, right? Is like these folks, right? It's like these folks now need creativity more than ever. And I think things were actually probably really tough for anybody who was in that age range at that time. But for me, as a high schooler who was growing up in Cupertino, it was just cool to see, right? I didn't understand it beyond that. Yeah, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
Yeah. The so Kenneth would have number 16.
Gotcha. So with how you've mentioned the community of Japantown many times and like the various concerns that you may have, can you elaborate on what specific concerns you have about the future of Japantown? Like things maybe like what would you like to see it become in the future? Like maybe if the future generations would, develop it even further than what it already is, or maybe if there are any other communities that you love that you wish to maybe see them take shape in the future as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's like, what if I were to almost choose what Japantown would become, like what are directions that I would like to see it take? Yeah, I think the change that I see over time, and it's natural, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, is a lot of business owners are people. I think Japantown, and this is something that I was talking to a realtor about recently, is that Japantown is the type of place that openings don't come up very often, and when they do, they are like highly sought after. There's a lot of people who have their eyes on this neighborhood because it is centrally located. It's safe, it has a downtown strip, and it has just, I think, this allure of being in. I think people like love things like Japantown from like people want to live in places that seem cool, and Japantown for some reason has that aura. And it's the same from a business perspective, where I think whenever there's an opening, especially something that is yeah, I don't know how else to say it, but this place is a place that for some reason all different types of businesses attract, and people, it's highly sought after. So over time, I think we're slowly seeing businesses shift, and I think in the name of like revitalizing the neighborhood, there have been a lot of new businesses opening in the past even 5 years that I've been here. I don't know. I think that there is a specific, I guess, mutual understanding that most folks have here with regards to community involvement, what we want out of the community. I think like a respect for old things and a love for history. A lot of these things are retained by the business owners here, and I think that over time, I would hate to see this place become something that felt corporate or felt like the community was being taken advantage of. And I think about that sometimes, even with. I don't want to get too political, but we feel the shift pretty gradually. I'm sorry, guys. What was the second part of the question?
Second part was that, like, are there any other communities that you think are dear to you that you have like similar concerns with about how you see them like taking shape or developing in the future?
Yeah. I guess other Japantowns would be a big one. I think like when I think about Japantown, San Francisco, I've talked to folks who have come in and talked to me about just the loss of a lot of their community spaces and places that are really really big in their community. That like even like Benkyodo, their mochi shop closed down 3 or 4 years ago, and I was at the grand closure, and it was like a really emotional thing for the entire community. And that place had been there for I think over 100 years. So like that place, it's like we're seeing sort of this thing that I think is natural, which is sort of the passing away and the slow dilution of this community. I think the places that I would like to see Japantown maybe lean a little bit more towards is places that I think have this. And Japantown, actually, to be completely transparent, is a place that I think represents a lot of things that are really really cool. I think that this is a place that is like, it cherishes creativity, it cherishes history, it cherishes like really really deeply rooted in cultural things, but also feels very forward looking. So in that way, I think Japantown is really really unique and very cool in that regard. And also for small business, it's one of those places that is aggressively small business owned. um I think when I think about the progression of Japantown, I I look at places like there's neighborhoods in Hawaii, especially like one of our favorite places is Kaimuki, which is this small little neighborhood, maybe like 10 minutes north of Waikiki. And it's like very, very small business. New things are constantly opening. People are just constantly doing creative things. There's like 4 or 5 coffee shops. People are just constantly just making things and making it work. And the entire area uses it as a community center in a way that I've never really seen. Right. So like there's the way that it is especially Honolulu is split up into like valleys that go up into a mountain, and then everybody comes down from the mountain to hang out in this neighborhood basically. And like you feel it when you're there. Everybody who grew up there knows this strip of land and like goes there as like their primary day to day. So I think that's a big one. Is the other part of Hawaii is that it's like inherently multicultural, and I don't think anybody is like fighting to tell the Japanese American story in the same way that people in the mainland are, right? I think that um, the cool thing about Hawaii is, and that's sort of the stage that I see us reaching eventually, is they're inherently multicultural and they're not really as concerned with the preservation component. It's more about the future of Asian American or Hawaiian culture. Um, the other places would be, I think when I look at places like Orange County, where there's like a large historical Japanese American community, but there's also a young community of Japanese folks or just Asian American folks that wanted to make their name. And you can feel that in cities like Costa Mesa, where it feels both very Japanese, but also very Japanese American. There's like it's not like there's this difference between them. It's just like one culture that sort of like feeds back into each other. Same with Torrance and Gardena. But I think the thing that Japantown retains over those is it's aggressively Japanese American, specifically not even Japanese, just like super super Japanese American. And yeah, it's still like a very very like community space. Like people who grew up in this thing still come back constantly.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I was just thinking about all the housing that's being built in the Japantown area, and I know there's some issues around sewage and just issues, right, that can come up when you have a concentration of people in any place.
Yeah.
Is that something that concerns the local community of businesses, small businesses, or is that more like an opportunity, or is it both? Like to see big, tight, small condos that are expensive, but just kind of really overnight, you see them kind of come up. And do you see that as an opportunity to, I guess, grow that neighborhood, or do you see it as potentially a threat to its uniqueness?
I think you're right. I think it's both, right? I think that as the neighborhood grows and there are more eyes on the neighborhood, there's more. Honestly, I mentioned that like I think given the growth of Japantown in the last 10 years, I think that it has be I don't think previously it was a place that people moved because they wanted to live in a cool young neighborhood in San Jose at all, right? I think like when when I talked to the previous owner of this shop, he was telling me that the reason that these streetwear stores were looking to move to Japantown was because A, it was pretty dead at that time, and B, it was close to downtown and the rents were cheap. It wasn't like a specific, I want to be here because of this thing. Over time they grew that connection, but at that time it wasn't really a cool place to go, right? I think I don't know. As things change, I worry about the direction a lot, but I think at the same time, I'll lean back on the thought of this natural pruning will happen. The folks that really resonate with the neighborhood will end up staying. I think that the folks that came here expecting it to be a little bit more of a wonderland and they find that it's something else, or they don't really feel a connection with that community, will end up likely leaving, right? And that's the same with us, where we were in an apartment for a long time. And we saw folks that came in and didn't really understand what the community was about and ended up leaving. And then we found a lot of friends who don't plan on ever leaving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes total sense. So is there anything else you'd like to add to the interview that we didn't mention, or any questions for us as we kind of close out? We gave you all our questions, so it's up to you, like if you want to add anything or something that you feel like you didn't really get a chance to say about, not only community but Japantown, and your sort of life experience and what you're learning from all this work you're doing.
I feel like I've been talking a lot. So not much too much else to add on my end. I guess the two things that came to my mind just now that I forgot to add. When we were talking about like changes in Japantown and losses of Japantown businesses, we recently lost an optometrist, which was Shin Mori Optometry, and they were there for like 50 years, probably, run by the same family, and recently sold to VSP. And losing them was one of those things that, and I've talked to the owner about sort of the change, and it seems like it was this aggressive shift from being a local business to feeling like you're a part of like the biggest, oldest corporate structure ever. That was a big loss, and that's something that I worry about, is sort of just the loss of Japanese American community stuff. And then the other one was Santo Market. They haven't closed. They're still very much in business, and they're probably doing better than they've ever done. But they used to, pre-pandemic, they used to have this indoor dining space, which was like the randomest. You walk into a grocery store and there's like 10 tables in the middle, and there's always folks of all different ages just sitting and eating stuff and just like hanging out. And you could talk to somebody who was 40 years older than you whenever you wanted inside Santo Market. I feel like a lot of interesting connections were being made at that time. So the loss of that was another, like a third space lost in Japantown. I don't know. I guess from your guys' perspective, where do you expect Japantown to go? And I guess like from your studies, right, what is the sort of natural development of these sort of communities?
Good question.
If there is such a thing.
Yeah. Before you answer that, there was a quick footnote I wanted to share. There's a film called The Wash in 1988 that was filmed in Japantown.
Yep.
And you mentioned Santo Market. I wondered if that was filmed partly in there, because there was definitely a scene where there's tables that are kind of randomly in this big room, and it's like, it looks like a house, but then it also looks like a business. Anyway, I don't know if you've heard of it, The Wash.
Yeah, I've seen The Wash. Actually, we have a TV, like an old school TV, that is constantly displaying old films directly outside the shop. So it's like if you look into our window display.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I put in a bunch of clips from The Wash in there that are constantly.
Oh, you did? Okay, you know about it. Okay.
I know the exact scene you're talking about. If I'm not wrong, it might have been inside of what was then called, and don't quote me on this, it was either inside of the Sakamoto Barbershop, which is on the corner of 6th, or it could have been inside what was then Shanghai Restaurant, which was where State of Grace, the tattoo shop, is now. Before, it used to be a 2-story dim sum place, where I think the second story was like the go-to banquet spot for many years.
Yeah, it was dim sum they were serving, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Anyway, that was a little random note. But so your question was more around the future of Japantown,
or even like where would, as somebody who's, I guess, where would you like to see this community go even?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I guess I haven't really had the students reading or this quarter we didn't visit the museum and do the tour, we did it last year. But for me, I guess my thing is mom and pop stores staying open and generationally being, run by their children. But, I think that's kind of a lot to ask for this economy and the pressures that it has on younger people. It's a tall order for, a child to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to run this shop that my parents have been running with all of their other aspirations at the same time, running at the same time. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of idealism, when it comes to places like this. And in a conversation with Tamiko Rast, she mentioned how a lot of the people that have these high aspirations for Japantown being Japanese generationally don't have children working in the community, and they don't have hours that they're putting into the community. So I don't want to say too much about my dream Japantown, other than to say that it is my hope that it stays local. I know it's going to be more and more diversified, and that's just the natural progression of global capitalism and just neighborhoods in general, like they're becoming more diverse. And but yeah, I would like to see it continue to be at least local, if not generational, then local. And yeah, and I like the culturality of it too. You're right. You feel like you belong there, even if you're not Japanese.
Yep.
And I think that's powerful, especially in these days and times, as we see our sort of national culture going in a different direction. It's nice to have these kind of communities that kind of stabilize a sense of belonging.
Yeah, we actually had this display T-shirt that was modeled after when Japanese Americans got the notice that they had to start relocating, and it was made by the Japanese American National Museum, which is in LA, right? And it basically said Japanese Americans need to be vigilant. We cannot let this happen again. And if you start to see signs of this sort of stuff, then we need to take action now. I had that hanging in the window, and then it was sold in the first day, and then the next couple days after that, I got another one, and it sold also the same day. So it's one of those things where I don't want to be hyper political, but especially now, Japantown feeling like a place that is inclusive is something that I think like resonates really deeply.
Yes. Thank you for the interview. I really appreciate it. We learned a lot. I believe I learned a lot just from this 1 hour. So just want to thank you again, Brendan, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you all for the time. Thanks for listening to me for so long.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you at the shop. And
Thank you.
thank
Come by
you.
anytime.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.